Gaza, the Israel-Hamas war has escalated and is escalating more. More than 10,000 people have been killed. And now the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has spelled out his country's endgame for Gaza. He says Israel will have the security responsibility over the Gaza Strip after the war. This is the most clear indication by the Israeli side over their plans for the aftermath of this war. During an interview, Prime Minister Netanyahu backed his comments with the October 7th attacks, saying a lack of Israeli security responsibility led to Hamas's attacks. However, Netanyahu did not share much detail about Israeli security oversight in Gaza after the war. Earlier, Israel had insisted that it does not plan to reoccupy the enclave. Since 2005, Israel has maintained control over the territory's airspace, coastline, population registry, and majority of its border crossings. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear that there can be no ceasefire until all hostages are released. Hamas, on the other hand, says that Israel should stop its bombing first for a breakthrough. Meanwhile, Gazans continue to suffer. Hospitals in Gaza are flooded with those injured. One of the hospitals reportedly saw more than 100 deaths in a single day. The UN chief says Gaza is now becoming, quote, a graveyard for children. Okay, for more on this, we are being joined by Jonathan S. Tobin, editor-in-chief of JNS, or Jewish News Syndicate. He's a senior contributor to The Federalist and a columnist for The New York Post and Newsweek. Jonathan joins us from New York. Jonathan, welcome to WION. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that Israel will govern Gaza after this war for an indefinite period of time. What sort of arrangements do you see?
Well, I think what he has been forced to, what Israel has been forced to plan on is something that he didn't want to do. That's why it withdrew from Gaza, withdrew every soldier, settler, and settlement in 2005 in the hope that it would be an incubator for peace, not a terrorist state on its border. But I think it envisions what exists on the West Bank in Judea and Samaria, where the Palestinian population is governed by a autonomous authority, the Palestinian Authority, run by Fatah, Hamas's slightly more moderate rival. While Israel still maintains security control. That's an anomalous situation. Nobody really likes it, but it's the only way to keep terrorism from popping out again, as it did during the Second Intifada. And it's the only way to keep Mahmoud Abbas, the PA leader, alive. Hamas has proved that it cannot keep a ceasefire. There was, after all, a ceasefire in effect on October 6th, before the atrocities of October 7th. Israel cannot tolerate a terrorist state willing to engage in mass slaughter on its borders. They tried to live with Hamas for 17 years. It can't do it. So it's been forced to try to replicate what exists on the West Bank. That's the only alternative. As much as nobody in Israel wants it, remember, what are the alternatives? Let Hamas stay in power and commit more atrocities? Wait for the international community to do something? We all know that won't happen. The Arab states to get involved? They'll never do it. Israel is the only possible. It's the worst plan, but it's better than all the others.
Yeah, and that's why one has to wonder why some nations continue to really pound for this ceasefire moving forward. Jonathan, I want to get your thoughts on Anthony Blinken's recent trip. Do you think he achieved his objectives? And also the Biden administration, it's hard to try to figure out whether they really have a concrete policy or they're reacting to their numbers in the polls.
Well, they're trying to do what can only be described as a balancing act. President Biden, his policies of appeasement of Iran and distancing itself from Israel before October 7th, I think can be fairly blamed for setting the circumstances that led this to happen. But since October 7th, he's been rightly expressing, Israel's right to defend itself, that Hamas is evil, not merely just a bad actor, but an evil organization that needs to be destroyed. But that isn't popular with the base of its party. It's popular with most Americans, but not with the majority of Democrats, which puts President Biden in a very difficult situation. He's already, in a bad situation in the polls for 2024. The presidential election's just around the corner. In the United States, it's an election cycle that never ends. So he's worried about his base abandoning him. which is sort of an intersectional leftist base that is in favor of these ceasefires, partly out of a misguided belief that that would be the best thing for, humanitarian purposes, although keeping Hamas in power is the opposite of what is good for anybody. And so he has to try to appease his base while sticking to his principles. And, Blinken is just dancing as fast as he can in order to do that. A lot of these actors, some of these Arab states, Jordan in particular, which is raging at Israel, some of the other ones, privately, they will be very happy when Hamas is destroyed. The last thing they want is an Islamist state active, which is basically an Iranian agent. Remember, after all, the alliance, the tacit alliance between Israel and the Arab states was created by President Obama's attempt at a rapprochement with Iran. The Arab states felt abandoned by the United States. They see Israel as an ally. And, as much as they have to, vocalize their concern for the Palestinian people, they do not want Hamas to win this war. Unfortunately, many of the people demonstrating for a ceasefire, and speaking of Palestine from the river for the sea, whether they admit it or not, they are demonstrating for Hamas. They are Hamas's useful idiots at best. And Israel has to ignore them. And Biden is trying to somehow survive in between these two, these two between a rock and a hard place, which is no easy place for him to be.
And, there's no easy answer to this question, I know, but a humanitarian pause on the one hand or a ceasefire on the other, would any of these keep the hostages safe? And how can we keep those hostages safe moving forward?
I mean, honestly, there is no real answer to how the only way to keep them safe is for Hamas to release them. They have no right. They have no right to keep them. They have no right to cross into Israel and kill 1,400 people, whole families, men, women, and children, commit unspeakable atrocities, rape, desecrating the bodies of the dead, and kidnapping as many as 240 people. They have to release them. And until they're using them as human shields, just as they use the Palestinian population. Everyone knows that Hamas's main command and control center is underneath the largest hospital in Gaza. So, Israel would love to be able to rescue them. Israel would really do just about anything to secure their safe release, but not to allow Hamas to emerge victorious from this. And that is the terrible dilemma that Israel has been put into. It's a terrible dilemma for the international community. But the answer isn't to give in to the terrorists, because the bottom line here, as much as Israelis want those hostages back home, safe and sound, they cannot let the perpetrators of the October 7th massacres escape punishment or be allowed to remain in power to commit further outrages as they promised to do.
Okay, well, Jonathan Tobin, thank you so much for joining us on WION, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thanks very much.